On Maple Street, secrets didn't need locks. They just needed a shared fence. The first clue was an extra trash bin at the curb with a number I didn't recognize. Cul-de-sacs run on tiny signals. A new car angle, a curtain left half drawn, a lawn that suddenly looks too perfect. People think drama arrives like a siren. It usually starts like a clipboard. In neighborhoods, power isn't loud. It shows up as forms, notices, and who replies all to the email thread. You know this. You skim the HOA updates until one line contains your name, then you read every word twice. I was the HOA secretary because I typed fast and didn't mind commas. That morning, I opened a change of occupancy notice from 811B, the yellow bungalow right next to ours, owned by Mr. Dahl, a retired band director who collected wind chimes and property tax exemptions. The first PDF had an empty line where the new occupant's name should go. An hour later, a revised version landed in my inbox with a single addition. Occupant, Travis M. Holder. That was my fiancé's full legal name, the one we used on caterer contract. I stared at it until the letters felt like a prank. Engagements test a person's relationship with space. Some people consolidate. One drawer becomes two, toothbrushes multiply, the bed learns a new symmetry. Others carve out buffer zones. They swear it's temporary, just until the painting is done or the lease is up. If you've ever planned a wedding, you know how quickly logistics start speaking louder than promises. You tell yourself not to overreact, but you check the timestamp on the email anyway, as if minutes can explain motives. I walked next door with an excuse ready, borrowing a ladder. A rental truck idled at the curb, the driver scrolling his phone. Board. The garage was open. Inside, boxes sat in tidy rows with blue painter's tape labels written in Travis's blocky print. Office, cables, records, kitchen, spices. My phone buzzed. A text from him. At the gym. Call you after? Mr. Dahl waddled out in socks and said, "Give me 5. I'm rearranging." Behind him, propped near the workbench, was a red Milwaukee toolbox. Stenciled in white on the side were 2 letters I knew too well. TH. I stood in the driveway, holding my empty hands like I'd forgotten what I came for. The HOA notice still open on my screen. People assume betrayal announces itself with lipstick or late nights. In suburbs, it shows up as paperwork and labels. The rational mind likes order, so it gives you steps. Confirm, document, then act. That sequence is comforting because it keeps you from exploding. You've been there, standing in a doorway, holding evidence that looks both ordinary and ridiculous, bargaining with common sense like it's a referee. I went home and opened the HOA dashboard. Our bylaws required new occupants to request parking decals and list vehicles. A fresh request sat in the queue from 811B. Plate number, make, model, Travis's silver Civic. The message thread showed. Submitted by owner Dahl. And a note. Occupant moving essentials this week. Full move by end of month. There was a scan lease addendum signed by Mr. Dahl and, in a tidy digital font, Travis M. Holder. You know the sick feeling when a signature looks familiar even when it's electronic? It lands like an inside joke you weren't told. I called him. Jim's loud, he said. Bright and normal. Leg day. Can we talk later? People in love create script. The healthy ones adjust them when facts change. The stubborn ones keep performing even as the set falls down. I heard the clang of weights and, under it, an echo that could have been a door chime. I said nothing about 811B. Not yet. Suspicion turns you into a scientist or a cop. Either way, you start losing the part of yourself that laughs easily. Mr. Dahl answered on the second knock. He smelled like cedar chips. Temporary arrangement, he said before I asked. Your fella's storing some things. Young people need space, right? He beamed at me like I was a niece. Behind him, the boxes were gone from the garage. The toolbox had moved into the house. There's a neighbor archetype who floats on goodwill and half-truths. He believes everyone is basically decent and logistics are acts of kindness. You learn to love those men and never plan a project with them. That night, I took the recycling out twice. I didn't need to. Lights were on in 811B's front room. Through the gap in the curtains, a lamp I recognized, our spare, the one with a dented shade from the move-in, threw a soft circle on a folding table. On the table sat a row of spice jars, alphabetized the way Travis did it when he was avoiding something. I left an HOA notice in Mr. Dahl's mailbox. Routine occupancy inspection required. Proposed time Thursday at 10 a.m. It was boring, official, and exactly the lever I had. 30 minutes later, my phone buzzed with an email. Thursday work, the reply said. The sender field didn't say Mr. Dahl. It said, T. Holder on behalf of owner. Adults don't chase answers. They schedule them. Thursday at 10 gave me a place to put the anger, like a dish on a rack. Until then, the mind does that strange thing where it turns into a committee. One member drafting emails, one rehearsing speeches, one measuring heart rate against reason. If you've ever waited out a decision, you know the quiet is louder than any argument. It's where you trade dignity for data. HOA inspections are boring by design. You check smoke alarms, GFCI outlets, visible egress, water shutoffs, and whether anyone turned a garage into a bedroom. Bureaucracy keeps feelings in their lane. The archetype here is the responsible neighbor. Clipboard steady, voice neutral, facts first. You aspire to it when your personal life is messy, because procedure is the one language that doesn't flinch. You, listening, might think you'd confront him in the driveway. You wouldn't. You'd do the inspection, because paper beats impulse when consequences get real. Mr. Dahl let me in with a flourish, like he was unveiling a model home. The living room was bare except for a folding table and a lamp I recognized. On the table sat a label printer, a postal scale, a tape gun, and neat stacks of padded mailers. Not furniture. Operation. A whiteboard leaned against the wall with bullet points. Fulfill back orders. Decals, call supplier, post office cutoff 4:30. The kitchen counters were clear except for a row of spice jars and our dented skillet. It looked less like a hideout and more like a staging area, which is its own kind of betrayal. Secrets don't always involve people. Sometimes they involve logistics you weren't trusted to hold. He arrived 2 minutes late, gym bag slung over his shoulder, sweat darkening the collar of his t-shirt. Hey, he said, a quick smile that tried to fold the world back into normal. I kept my voice even and read from the checklist. Hallway smoke detector test, back door deadbolt confirm. In the spare room, boxes labeled in his print line the wall. Inventory, Q3, returns, office, cables. A carton sat open with branded stickers, sleek navy circles that said, Harbor Mile Goods. I'd never heard of it. In love, you expect to know the nouns of a person's life, jobs, projects, aliases. When one appears fully formed, you feel foolish for missing the verbs. At the kitchen table, a stack of USPS forms faced up, the return address pre-printed. T. Holder, 811B, Maple Street. There was a small surge of heat behind my sternum that had nothing to do with jealousy and everything to do with municipal fines. Our bylaws were clear about home businesses, limited clients, no visible inventory, no increased traffic. The responsible neighbor part of me flagged it. The fiancé part of me stared at the dent in the lampshade and remembered who made it. He stood with his hands on the chair back, like a student waiting for the bell. I finished the list, signed the form, and slid a copy across the table. There's a business use clause, I said, finally choosing a noun both of us could survive. He nodded once, relief flickering in his eyes, like I'd picked the smaller fire to put out. There's a type of person who treats intimacy like a storage problem. When rooms get crowded with feelings, he rents a second unit and calls it organization. You've met him. He says he's protecting the relationship by relocating the mess, as if distance equals care. The archetype is the compartmentalizer. Calm tone, neat labels, and a quiet belief that disclosure is a luxury best saved for after lunch. He took the inspection form, like a student holding a hall pass. It's temporary, he said. Harbor Mile is just a side thing. The supplier sent the wrong batch. My old storage month ended. Dahl had space. I didn't want our place to look like a warehouse. Compartmentalizers always stack reasons like pallets, each one light, together immovable. You want to argue with the stack, but you can only lift one box at a time. So you pick process. You would too. Procedure keeps you from narrating your own humiliation out loud. I explained the business use clause again and mentioned the cap on pickup. He nodded, promised no customer visits, said he'd move inventory out by month's end. The month's end. Notice how that phrase gives people courage while stealing it from you. He offered a thin smile, then a practical sop. I'll file the disclosure, he said. I'll email you copies. In healthy partnerships, paperwork is boring. When it becomes foreplay for trust, you're already negotiating terms you didn't agree to. And yet, you like terms. They have dates. Back home, the neighborhood app ping. Anyone else notice increased traffic by 811B? Delivery vans blocking the mailboxes. Bureaucracy forces a choice. You can be the fiancé or the secretary, not both at once. The responsible neighbor in you drafts a courteous reply about temporary use and compliance. The woman who bought a cake-tasting sampler with this man deletes it before posting. When you're split, you manage the version of you that will leave a paper trail. You schedule a quick board check-in for Monday and add Harbor Mile, temp use to the agenda. You tell yourself sunlight is good for things that should never have been kept in the dark. The bank app was the reveal I didn't want. Appending ACH to doll rentals with a memo that felt like a dare. 811B deposit. It came from our joint savings, the wedding spreadsheet account, the one labeled venue/contingencies. There are betrayals of body and betrayals of budget. Do not underestimate the second. Money tracks priorities without adjectives. You could call him and explode. Instead, you become the administrator, a cooler archetype and a safer one. I moved the remaining balance to my personal account, set an alert on withdrawals, and drafted 2 emails. The first to Travis. Please send a lease and a full rundown of Harbor Miles operations by tonight. We'll talk at 7. The second to myself, because adults do this when they're scared. A checklist with boxes to tick, disclosure filed, pickup limits documented, funds accounted for, decision on venue hold by Friday. I stared at the list until the line stopped shaking. Then I put a pot of water on the stove and waited for it to boil like timing could make order out of a life that had just forked. At 7 he showed up with a laptop and the samples, like he was pitching on a show. The compartmentalizer becomes the entrepreneur when cornered. He replaces apology with plan. You've seen it. The pivot to numbers, margins, and a future where the present gets forgiven because it paid off. There's a seduction in spreadsheets. They make choices look neutral. They erase the part where someone should have been told. He clicked through clean slides. Unit cost, supplier delays, break even. Harbor Mile prints decals and small run labels, he said. HOAs are a niche. People hate waiting for replacement. He set a navy circle in my palm, thick, glossy, professional. It would have impressed me 2 months ago. The trouble with competence is how easy it makes bad judgment look tidy. I asked about the deposit. He said Dahl required it. I asked why the address change. He said logistics. These are reasons that sound like solutions because they were work boots. On his screen, a tab label flashed when he toggled. Maple HOA roster. Final. He moved fast, but not fast enough. If you've ever seen your own work stare back from someone else's machine, you know the punch of it. I kept my voice flat. Where did you get that file? He tried honesty light. It was open on your desktop last week, he said. I copied it, just for labels. I wasn't going to bug you for every address. The archetype shifted again to the justifier, who frames convenience as consideration. You want to believe him because believing him keeps your life neat. You can't because using that roster without permission puts both of you in the blast zone. There are 2 kinds of trust breaches, the ones that humiliate you and the ones that endanger you. This was the second. As HOA's secretary, my name sat under the privacy clause. Unauthorized use meant fines, complaints, and me explaining to a board why my fiancé had a resident list on his laptop. I told him that plainly. You don't get to borrow my authority because it helps your startup. He said he'd delete it. Deleting isn't undoing. You know that. I asked if any orders had shipped to our street. He admitted a few replacements had been pilots. The word tried to make it sound experimental instead of prohibited. Adult decisions feel smaller than movies make them. You don't throw a glass or deliver a speech. You pick actions you can document. I asked for the roster back and every label template that used it. He exported files, named and dated them while I watched, then airdropped them to my phone. I forwarded them to myself and the HOA legal inbox with a bland subject line. Data exposure, self-reported. That phrase saved my stomach. It meant I wasn't hiding. It meant the next conversation I'd have wasn't a confession. It was a report. He reached for the sample pack again, like we could return to the pitch. I told him the business had to stop at 8/11B now, not end of the month now. No pickups. No shipments, no roster, and no rent draws from joint accounts. He said he'd move it tomorrow. Compartmentalizers always say tomorrow like it's a promise. Out the window, a van idled in front of 811B, hazard lights blinking. A guy in a cap walked to the porch holding a clipboard. He rang once and checked his watch. We both looked at him. Small reveals don't need drum. They need timing. I stepped outside before the bell rang a second time. Pick up for Harbor Mile, the driver said, reading from his phone. Daily for P. p.m. Daily was the word that turned a mistake into his system. I told him pickups at 8:11 were paused pending compliance. He shrugged like a man used to addresses changing moods and typed refused NOAETH into his handheld. He asked for a name. I gave him mine with the title that mattered here, not the one on my left hand. Procedure has a tone. It steadies you when your personal grammar is shaking. Back inside, I sent 3 emails. First to the board. Data exposure reported. Conflict noted. I'll recuse from discussion. Second to legal. Please draft notice. Commercial use and roster misuse. Third to Travis and Mr. Dahl together. Effective immediately. Cease business activity at 8:11. No pickups. No shipments. No storage expansion. Provide lease and disclosure by 6 p.m. You listening might think that sounded cold. It was. Cold is a tool when warmth has been used against you. Mr. Dahl shuffled over 5 minutes later, flustered by the driver's U-turn. I thought he'd told you. He said, palms up. It's just a guest room. Young men need space till the big day. The neighborly uncle archetype believes logistics are kindness. He lends keys like sugar. He's been quiet. Pays on time. He said it like red-cured secrecy. I asked plainly if Travis had a key. He nodded and fished a second fob from a ceramic dish by his door. It had a red tag labeled Tea Back. He meant well and made it worse. With Dahl hovering, I did a compliance walkthrough to document conditions. The living room still looked like operations, but the back bedroom didn't. A neatly made bed, 2 pillows, a duffel in the closet, not empty. His running shoes under the chair, the left heel crushed like always. In the bathroom, twin pack of his brand of razors, a travel toothpaste rolled tight, a second toothbrush drying in a cup. It wasn't storage, it was residence. I took photos of the business items and none of the personal ones. You keep your evidence clean when you might someday need it to defend the part of you that still wants to be kind. I texted him one sentence. Are you living at 811B? He took 6 minutes. Staying some nights to focus, he replied. Didn't want to argue while I ran. Avoidance rename avoidance as optimization. I asked if the deposit came from our joint account because he thought partnership included permission. He said, it's temporary. Temporary is a bridge word people use when they've already crossed the river. I replied with logistics. Pack personal items tonight. Return the backdoor key. Bring the lease at 8. We'll decide next steps. The board held an emergency call without me. I watched the minutes populate live like a scoreboard. Motion to issue notice. Passed. Daily fine schedule. If non-compliance continued, approved. Requirement to certify destruction of any resident data in his possession, unanimous. Legal forwarded the draft with subject line that landed like a gavel. Notice of violation. 811B, unauthorized occupancy/commercial use. I printed 2 copies and set them by the door. Then I slid my ring onto the dish next to my keys. Not as a gesture, just to wash my hands and keep working. The timer on my phone chimed for 6 p.m. Compliance has a clock. Feelings do too. Tonight would decide which one set the calendar. At 8 on the dot, he knocked like a tenant. That's the sound of a boundary arriving in human form. The archetype in moments like this is the negotiator, papers in hand, voice soft, eyes scanning for exit. You've met him at work and at kitchen tables. He asks for understanding first and compliance second, as if the order might change the math. He set the lease on the counter. 3 months, month to month after, signed 2 weeks ago. Start date, the same week we sent save the dates. I didn't want to dump chaos in the apartment, he said. This was a buffer. Compartmentalizers rebrand distance as stewardship. You nod because the word is tidy. Then you read line items anyway. A clause about exclusive occupancy jumped out. That means you, I said. Not inventory, not couriers. He said inventory wasn't. Occupancy, which is how people lose arguments to definitions. You listening would have circled that clause too. It's where an explanation tries to pass itself off as a plan. I slid the printed notice across the counter. The board already voted, I said. Email when it's sick. Physical copy is courtesy. I kept it procedural because procedure keeps you from begging someone to remember who you were together. He read the headers. Unauthorized commercial use, unauthorized occupancy, corrective steps, and exhaled through his nose like a runner hitting a hill. Then he took out a key fob with a red tag and set it down. Small objects change weather. You can feel a house return to you in increments. A key, a password, a roster deleted while you watch. He offered an alternate. 2 weeks to unwind. No pickups. Inventory boxed by Friday. Bedroom cleared tonight. That's the appeaser, trading sequence for accountability. It tempts you because it sounds reasonable, and reasonable is such a relief after betrayal. But adulthood is deadline. I told him he had 48 hours to vacate and certified destruction of the roster copies. Funds back to the joint account by morning. Future business decisions require joint sign-off if they touch our money or our street. And the wedding budget freezes until we rebuild trust, I said. The sentence tasted like metal and relief. You don't need volume when you have terms. Mr. Dahl poked his head in like a sitcom neighbor, earnest and out of his depth. He apologized for miscommunications and asked if there be fines. I said yes, daily after tomorrow, if non-compliance continued, and that I was recused from adjudicating any appeal. Saying recused out loud helped. It reminded both of us that I wasn't going to hide him under my title. Travis nodded, eyes on the notice. I'll move it, he said, and for once didn't add tomorrow. He backed up the whiteboard, unplugged the label printer, and coiled the cords. When we got to the back bedroom, he lifted the shoes from under the chair and didn't meet my gaze. He carried the duffel past me like a man ferrying his own evidence. On the porch, the night felt square again. He pressed the back door fob into my palm. It was warm from his hand. Boundaries aren't speeches. They're objects changing pockets. By morning, the house next door sounded like a warehouse shutting itself down. He'd found a storage unit off the highway and hired 2 guys from a moving app. The compartmentalizer became the complier. Tired, quiet, head down. I stood on the porch with a clipboard and counted what left. Label printer, postal scale, 8 banker's boxes of inventory, the folding table, the dented lamp. People think repair is a feeling. It's actually receipts. Funds hit the joint account at 9:17 a.m. Screenshot attached. He emailed a signed affidavit certifying he deleted the roster and any backups. You roll your eyes at paperwork until it's the only bridge back to dignity. The board posted, "Notice satisfied. Monitoring," to the portal by noon. I reset the roster password, logged out all devices, and messaged residents. Data exposure contained. No emails or phone numbers released. Address list purged. Pickup traffic halted. Neighborhoods run on relief more than outrage. The thread filled with thumbs up and lawn tips within an hour. Mr. Dahl hovered in his driveway with an apologetic plate of brownies. I took one because accepting kindness is also compliance. Everyone returning to their lane. If you've ever cleaned up a mess without calling it a scandal, you know the odd sweetness of ordinary chores afterward. I watered the hydrangeas like they hadn't heard a thing. That night, we sat at our kitchen table without the samples between us. He admitted what men like him rarely say out loud. He'd been scared of becoming the boring provider before anything he built had a shape. He'd convinced himself secrecy was a gift, shielding me from chaos. While using my access as a shortcut, the archetype shifted to the apologizer. No theatrics, just sentences that landed. Apology is a door. Terms are what make it a hinge. I laid out a 1-page plan. Independent business bank account, separate from joint funds. No use of my role or HOA resources, ever. Off-site operations only. Monthly transparency check with documents. Premarital counseling starting next week. Wedding expenditures pause 90 days. He read it, asked for a pen, and signed. You might think romance dies when it meets a memo. Sometimes it finally gets honest enough to live. 2 more logistics arrived like weather reports. The venue emailed about the non-refundable second deposit due Friday. I called and negotiated a conversion to a credit. Date flexible for 12 months if we move now. Bureaucracy rewards people who say exactly what they need. The post office also called. If Harbor Mile wanted daily pickups later, it needed a business account and a dock time at the annex, not a bungalow porch. I wrote both into the plan. He didn't argue. The red tag key fob stayed in my dish next to the ring. I wasn't punishing him. I was measuring us. When we finished, I opened my calendar and created a 30-day event titled Trust Check. Documents plus gut check. He saw the name and nodded. Small reveals didn't need speeches. They needed dates. Repair has 2 tracks. The public one with rules and the private one with nerves. In neighborhoods, the public track looks like hearings in minutes. The private track looks like 2 people deciding if they're partners or adjacent project. You know this balance. When you're strong in one, the other feels negotiable. Until it isn't. The board scheduled a compliance review for Tuesday. I stayed recused and took notes like any resident. He showed up with receipts, a cashier's check for fines, and a short statement that didn't grovel or spin. That's the accountable archetype. Clear facts, no heroic. Mr. Dahl apologized again and offered to fund the community garden with his portion, which turned an error into upkeep. Relief moved through the room like air conditioning. When groups see someone absorb consequences without theatrics, trust trickles back. Privately, we started counseling. Good therapists translate patterns into choices. She named his style: compartmentalizing as a fear of disappointing, optimization as avoidance. She named mine: management as safety, procedure as shield. You've sat in that chair, right? Where you realize your best skills are also the tools you use to dodge intimacy. The work wasn't pretty. He practiced telling me bad news at 10%, not after the plan was finished. I practiced asking for clarity without issuing a memo first. Small wins. He created a proper business account and sent me view-only access. I removed the HOA app from our shared iPad. The universe tests agreements with low-stakes temptation. A week later, a neighboring HOA messaged Harbor Mile asking if he could rush 60 decals. Old him would have pulled my roster template and smoothed it over. New terms meant a pause. He texted, "Request came in. Need a data release form and their board's approval. Can you send them the public policy link?" I didn't. I pasted the link into a reply from the official inbox and copied legal. He built a simple opt-in portal that same afternoon. That's what growth looks like. Not grand gestures, just boring systems that keep people honest. At home, the ring stayed on the dish until the 30-day trust check alert chimed. We set out 2 lists. Agreements kept, glitches spotted. No pickups at 811B. Kept. No pulls from joint funds. Kept. Transparent updates. Mostly kept. The glitch column had 1 line. He'd hesitated to tell me a supplier delay, worried it would sound like backsliding. He said it anyway. You don't grade that with stars. You feel the difference in your stomach. The venue credit sat in my inbox like a question we didn't owe anyone an answer to. We could push the date, scale it down, or cancel the spectacle and keep the commitment. Big choices shrink when the daily ones are right-sized. He asked if I wanted to wear the ring tonight or wait. I said I'd decide in the morning, after we took a walk past 811B and heard nothing at all. In the morning, Maple Street sounded like itself again. Sprinklers, a distant mower, a dog that disliked skateboards. We walked past 811B. No vans, no blinking hazards, no lamp glow through the curtains. Mr. Dahl waved from the driveway and pointed at the plot he'd staked for the community garden. The quiet wasn't dramatic. It was the kind that lets a thought finish. I looked at the ring on the dish in my pocket and decided what to do with it. Endings get attention. Maintenance does the work. The archetype now was the builder. Someone who treats trust like a structure you check and reinforce. You know this version of love. It's not a speech. It's the calendar invite that repeats, the bank account that stays clean, the inbox with no surprises. I emailed the venue and converted the deposit to a 12-month credit. We circled 2 dates next spring as maybes and booked a courthouse slot for a civil ceremony a month from Friday. Something small, 2 witnesses, dinner after. I slid the ring back on at the kitchen counter, not as a show, but as a schedule. He saw it and didn't reach for me. He said, "Okay," like someone accepting the terms of a job he wants to keep. That afternoon, we drove to the post office annex. He met the dock manager, filled out the business account forms, and booked a regular pickup window there instead of any porch. When he introduced me, "This is Leah, my neighbor and partner." The phrasing mattered. Neighbor first, because proximity is earned. Partner second, because that status is too. He showed me the business license, the bank app with my view-only login, the receipt for a cheap locking cabinet at the unit. You learn the difference between secrecy and privacy fast. Privacy has files you can look at. Secrecy has blanks you're expected to bless. The board closed the violation at our next meeting. I sat in the 3rd row and took notes like anyone else. Mr. Dahl's garden donation passed with smiles. We voted to update the business use policy. Clearer language about pickups. A short guide residents could understand. Signature lines that meant something. I stayed recused from the vote and walked home under a sky full of ordinary daylight. The wind chimes on Dahl's porch played a clumsy tune. Normal isn't thrilling. It's stable. That's what neighborhoods run on. We set one more recurring event on my calendar. Trust plus boring systems. First Sunday, 5 p.m. It sounded dull. Good. Dull is a plan. The courthouse date sat on the month view like a quiet milestone. We told no one yet. We owed our families a clean story, not a rushed one. That night, we left the front door open to the screen, cooked eggs, and didn't talk about Harbor Mile. We checked that the porch light worked at both houses. I put the ring dish back by the keys. It looked better holding nothing. Across the fence, 811B stayed dark. Soon the garden bed would go in. People would park straighter. Our street would keep its rules, and we would keep ours. That was the point. Two adjacent things, not hiding from each other, built well enough to last.